Somewhere in a shop right now, a needle stops moving. The artist leans back, looks at the line they just laid down, and sees it drifted half a millimeter off the stencil. There's no undo here, no fresh sheet to start over on. The skin is already marked, the client's already watching in the mirror, and whatever happens next happens on the same canvas permanently. That single fact, that a mistake can't be erased, quietly shapes almost every dollar in this industry. Start with the cost nobody mentions when someone says they want to become a tattoo artist. The price of admission, paid before a single dollar comes in. A tattoo apprenticeship isn't like an internship that at least pays minimum wage while you learn. Most are unpaid, full stop. You show up 5 or 6 days a week and clean stations, stretch canvases, answer phones, and watch, sometimes for years, before anyone lets you near real skin. Industry estimates put the typical apprenticeship at around 2.5 years, most of it unwaged. You're trading labor directly for access to someone else's knowledge. Some mentors charge for that access on top of the free labor, with paid apprenticeships commonly running $2,000 to $10,000, sometimes more in private mentorships. Even shops that don't charge cash up front are still extracting value, because every hour spent sweeping floors and sanitizing stations is an hour not spent earning a paycheck elsewhere. Run the math on a full-time minimum wage job over that same stretch, and the opportunity cost easily clears $30,000, money that never touches the apprentice's pocket, spent on tuition with no diploma, no accreditation, and no guarantee at the end. Compare that to almost any other skilled trade. An electrician apprentice gets paid on a wage scale while learning. So does a plumber apprentice. The tattoo industry runs on the opposite model, unpaid mentorship treated as a rite of passage, and it survives because demand to get in the door has always outpaced the number of chairs willing to teach. So the first real cost of this career is years of income that simply never existed. Once the apprenticeship ends and an artist can finally take paying clients, a second cost structure kicks in immediately, one that never goes away: the shop split. An artist working inside a shop almost never keeps everything a client pays. The shop provided the space, the reputation, the walk-in traffic, and often the training, so it takes a cut of every tattoo. 60% to the artist and 40% to the shop is common, though newer artists often start closer to 50-50, and high-demand artists with strong followings can eventually negotiate up to 70%. On top of whatever the shop keeps, the artist is still buying their own disposables, needles, ink caps, gloves, barrier film, consumed one client at a time and never reimbursed. Picture a 3-hour tattoo billed at around $150 an hour, $450 total. At a 40% shop cut, 180 of that disappears before supplies are even accounted for. Subtract another 20 or 30 in consumables, and the artist walks away with roughly $240 for 3 hours of demanding, technical work that took years of unpaid training just to attempt. Not a bad number, just much smaller than the sticker price ever suggested, and that's assuming a fair split and a session that goes exactly as planned. Sessions don't always go as planned, and this is where permanence comes back with real financial teeth. Every other service industry builds some version of a redo into the price. A bad haircut grows out in weeks and gets fixed for free without much fuss. A poorly cooked meal gets remade at the kitchen's expense, invisible to the diner. Tattooing has no equivalent because the product isn't something you replace, it's fused to a living person's skin. When a tattoo heals poorly, whether from a technical mistake, a client skipping aftercare, or just how someone's skin reacts to ink, the artist is expected to fix it for free. Blown out lines, uneven saturation, early fading, these get corrected through touch-up sessions that generate zero additional revenue. No chargeback to dispute, no insurance claim to reimburse lost time. The original 3 hours already happened. The touch-up hours just get absorbed. That creates an incentive most clients never think about. An artist protecting their income has real reason to work conservatively, to steer away from techniques or placements with higher risk of poor healing, even when a client wants something more ambitious. Playing it safe here isn't just artistic caution, it's financial, since every tattoo that heals badly is a future unpaid appointment already sitting on the calendar. Then there's the part of the job that never shows up on a price list, the drawing. A custom tattoo starts days or weeks before the needle ever touches skin, when the artist sketches concepts from a client's vague description, revises them back and forth, and produces a finished design the client may or may not book. That design time usually isn't billed separately. It's treated as included, a cost of doing business clients rarely see and therefore rarely value. An artist can sink 4 or 5 unpaid hours into a design for a client who cancels, and that time is just gone, the same way a freelance writer loses hours on a pitch that never sells. Popular, in-demand artists solve this eventually with a non-refundable design deposit. Newer artists, the ones who most need to protect their time, are usually the least able to enforce it, since charging deposits early risks losing bookings to whoever down the street doesn't. Everything so far has been financial. The next cost is physical, and it builds slowly enough that most artists don't notice it until a decade in. Tattooing means holding a hunched, precise posture for hours, often leaning over a client's body at an angle no desk job ever demands. Wrist and shoulder strain are common among career artists, along with eye strain from hours of fine detail work. Latex and ink sensitivities show up in some artists after years of exposure, occasionally forcing a change in materials or even a change in career. A desk worker can upgrade their chair. A tattoo artist's tool is their own body, bent over someone else's, and no ergonomic fix really solves that. There's a health and safety cost too, built into the fact that tattooing breaks skin. Every artist needs a bloodborne pathogen certification, renewed periodically, plus proper sterilization equipment, autoclaves, medical grade barriers, and record keeping that satisfies whatever health department has jurisdiction. Liability insurance isn't optional for anyone serious about the work, since a client alleging infection or a botched procedure is real legal exposure. None of it is dramatic money on its own, but stacked together, it's a permanent tax on staying licensed at all. Income doesn't arrive evenly across the year either. Visible tattoos, the kind people show off, sell better in warmer months when arms and legs are uncovered, so summer books up and winter slows down, especially for shops that lean on walk-in traffic rather than a loyal referral base. An artist without enough of a following to stay booked through the slow season is really living on 6 or 7 months of real income stretched across 12. Reputation is what actually drives this business. A tattoo artist has almost no traditional advertising that works. Nobody searches for tattoo artists the way they search for plumbers, comparing reviews and quotes. Client acquisition runs on portfolio photos, word of mouth, and increasingly a social media following that acts as a constantly updated storefront. A technically excellent artist who's invisible online or working in a shop with weak foot traffic can struggle financially for reasons that have nothing to do with their line work. That's why reported income across the industry varies so wildly. Some sources put median annual income in the low 40,000s, while artist reported ranges stretch from 25,000 for beginners past 6 figures for established names with a waiting list. That spread isn't really about skill gaps that large. It's about who's built enough of a following to stay consistently booked versus who's still filling the calendar one walk-in at a time. There's a version of this career that escapes most of what's described here, the one people picture when they imagine a famous tattoo artist: guest spots, conventions, a following big enough that people fly in just to sit in that chair. Artists at that level often charge flat rates per piece, sometimes in the thousands, and frequently work independently or as equal partners rather than under a commission split. That version can genuinely produce strong income. It also usually requires years of the exact unpaid apprenticeship, split commission grinding, and free touch-up absorbing described above, just to build the following in the first place. Owning a shop looks like the obvious way out of the split, and for some artists it is. A shop owner keeps a much bigger share of every tattoo done under their roof and can collect booth rent from other artists too. But ownership trades one set of costs for another: rent, business insurance, payroll if there's staff, marketing, and the plain risk of running a small business in a category that rises and falls with the broader economy. A shop owner in a slow winter isn't just missing personal income. They're watching a lease payment come due no matter how many chairs sit empty. None of this makes the career a losing bet. It just means the visible part, the finished tattoo, the happy client, the photo posted afterward is a small slice of what actually determines an artist's income. The apprenticeship years, the split, the unpaid design hours, the free touch-ups, the seasonal swings, and the unpaid work of building a following all sit underneath that photo, invisible to the client admiring their new ink in the mirror. There's a psychological cost too, one that gets less attention than the financial side, but affects earning capacity directly. A tattoo session, especially a long one, is intimate and often painful for the client, and the artist has to manage that in real time. Keeping someone calm through hours of discomfort, reading body language to know when to pause, absorbing whatever anxiety they bring into the chair along with their design idea. That's real, unpaid emotional labor stacked on top of the physical demands, and it's a big part of why burnout in this field often looks less like hating the craft and more like exhaustion from managing other people's nervous systems for 8 hours a day. Permanent work carries its own financial risk too: buyer's remorse. Someone can love a tattoo the day they get it and resent it 2 years later, and unlike a returned sweater, there's no refund that fixes that. Cover-up work and laser removal exist as entire sub-industries because of exactly this, and cover-up specialists sit in a strange spot in the trade. They're paid to fix somebody else's finished work, which often takes more skill than an original piece, yet clients perceive it as corrective rather than creative and price it accordingly. That mismatch between skill required and value perceived is its own quiet tax on artists doing a lot of repair work. A freelance graphic designer looks similar from the outside, builds a portfolio, depends on word of mouth, negotiates project by project instead of drawing a salary. But a designer's mistakes are correctable, the medium is infinitely revisable, and a bad client relationship ends in a refund or a redo, not a permanent mark on someone's body. That permanence is what makes tattooing structurally different from nearly every other creative freelance profession, and it's the reason the whole cost structure, apprenticeship, touch-ups, conservative risk-taking exists at all. Every dollar an artist charges is implicitly pricing in the fact that this can't be undone for the client or for them. The artists who build sustainable careers here are rarely the ones with the single best technical skill. They're the ones who took the business side as seriously as the art from the start. Negotiating a fair split as early as their leverage allowed, charging for design time once they had the demand to enforce it, building an online presence on purpose instead of by accident, and pricing risky work with the free touch-ups already baked in. One more thing worth naming, since it explains why this industry has never standardized the way most skilled trades have. Tattooing sits in a strange regulatory middle ground across the country. Some states require health department licensing, others leave oversight almost entirely to shop owners, and who counts as qualified to teach an apprentice varies by jurisdiction. That patchwork is part of why the unpaid, pay-to-learn apprenticeship model has survived, since no regulatory body ever forced the industry to professionalize its training the way cosmetology schools eventually were. An artist's path in looks completely different depending on which state they started in, and that inconsistency is its own hidden cost, since portfolio and word of mouth end up mattering more than any credential could. That's the part of this profession that sets it apart from almost every other trade. A carpenter who misjudges a cut can grab a new board. A chef who oversalts a dish can remake the plate before it reaches the table. A tattoo artist gets one attempt, performed live, on a canvas that walks out the door attached to another human being. Every dollar in this business, the apprenticeship debt, the split, the unpaid design hours, the free repairs, traces back to that one unforgiving fact: there's no draft, there's no return, and there's no version 2.